Marcus Blackwood pushed his janitor's cart down the marble hallway of Riverside Preparatory Academy, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor. To everyone around him, he was just another invisible worker in gray coveralls, mopping floors and emptying trash cans. What they didn't know was that this man owned 3 Fortune 500 companies and had enough money to buy the entire school 10 times over. But right now, none of that mattered. Because through the glass window of Study Room C, he could see something that broke his heart and filled him with hope at the same time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus adjusted his baseball cap and continued cleaning, his eyes drawn to the scene playing out in the small study room. His 16-year-old son Dylan sat hunched over a math textbook, his face twisted in frustration. Across from him, a girl about his age patiently pointed to equations on the page, her voice calm and encouraging despite Dylan's obvious agitation. "I don't get it, Emma," Dylan groaned, running his hands through his dark hair. "This stuff is impossible." Emma Rodriguez looked up from the textbook, her worn sneakers crossed beneath the plastic chair. Her clothes were clean but clearly second-hand. A faded blue sweater with a small hole near the elbow and jeans that had been hemmed by hand. Despite her modest appearance, there was something about her posture, the way she carried herself, that spoke of quiet dignity. "Let's try a different approach," she said softly, pulling out a piece of scrap paper from her backpack. "Sometimes when I was struggling with my little brother's homework, I'd draw pictures to help us both understand." Marcus paused his cleaning routine, pretending to organize supplies while he listened. This was the 4th time this week he'd witnessed this scene, and each time it left him more intrigued. Emma wasn't a paid tutor. He'd already checked with the school administration. She wasn't receiving any community service credits either. She was simply helping his son out of the goodness of her heart. Dylan leaned forward as Emma began sketching out a simple diagram, breaking down the complex algebraic equation into visual components. "See? If we think of x as the number of apples, and y as the number of oranges, then this equation is just asking us how many pieces of fruit we have in total." For the first time in weeks, Marcus saw his son's face light up with understanding. "Oh, so if x equals 12, then—" "Exactly!" Emma smiled, her whole face transforming. "You're getting it." Marcus had been working at the school for 3 months now, ever since Dylan's grades had taken a catastrophic nosedive. When the private investigators and academic consultants had failed to identify the root of his son's problems, Marcus decided to take matters into his own hands. He'd used his connections to secure the janitor position under the assumed name Marcus Blake, complete with fabricated work history and references. At first, he suspected drugs or bullying, but what he discovered was far more complex. Dylan wasn't acting out or rebelling. He was simply lost. The prestigious preparatory school moved at a breakneck pace, and somehow his son had fallen through the cracks. The teachers, overwhelmed with their own responsibilities, had little time for individual attention. Dylan's friends were more interested in their social media followers than academic achievement. He was drowning in plain sight. "My mom always said that everyone learns differently," Emma continued, unaware of the man listening from the hallway. "Some people need to see it, some need to hear it, and some need to touch it to understand." "What does your mom do?" Dylan asked, genuinely curious. Emma's smile faltered slightly. "She used to be a teacher, before she got sick." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He'd been so focused on observing his son that he hadn't considered Emma's own story. Now he found himself genuinely curious about this girl who showed up every day after school, patiently helping a classmate who clearly came from a different world than hers. "I'm sorry," Dylan said, his voice softer than Marcus had heard it in months. "Is she okay now?" "She's fighting," Emma replied simply, returning her attention to the math problem. "That's what matters." Over the next hour, Marcus watched his son work through problem after problem with Emma's guidance. Dylan's usual impatience and quick temper were nowhere to be seen. Instead, he listened carefully to Emma's explanations, asked thoughtful questions, and even made a few jokes that earned genuine laughter from his tutor. When other students passed by the study room, Marcus noticed how they looked at Emma, not with cruelty exactly, but with the casual dismissal that wealthy teenagers often showed toward those they perceived as beneath their social status. Emma seemed oblivious to their stares, completely focused on helping Dylan understand the material. "I think I actually get this stuff now," Dylan said as they packed up their books. "Thanks, Emma, really." "We're a good team," she replied, slinging her worn backpack over her shoulder. "Same time tomorrow?" "Definitely." As Emma headed toward the school's main exit, Marcus quickly pushed his cart in the opposite direction, taking a route that would allow him to observe her departure without being seen. He watched through the window as she walked to the bus stop, her steps purposeful, despite the weight of her backpack loaded with textbooks. The yellow school bus that stopped for her was clearly not the same luxury charter buses that transported most of Riverside Prep students. This was a city bus, the kind that served the working-class neighborhoods on the other side of town. As it pulled away with Emma aboard, Marcus felt a mixture of admiration and guilt wash over him. Here was a girl who traveled across the city every day to attend school, who took the time to help a classmate she barely knew, who maintained her dignity and kindness despite circumstances that would challenge anyone. Meanwhile, his own son, who had every advantage money could buy, had been struggling in silence, too proud or too embarrassed to ask for help. That evening, Marcus sat in his home office in the penthouse overlooking the city, still wearing his janitor's uniform. The contrast wasn't lost on him. Surrounded by awards, expensive art, and reminders of his financial success, while dressed as one of society's invisible workers. He pulled out his laptop and began researching Emma Rodriguez. What he found made his admiration grow even stronger. She was an honor student, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working part-time at a local diner. Her mother, Maria Rodriguez, had indeed been a teacher before being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 2 years earlier. They lived in a modest apartment in the Riverside district, and Emma had been awarded a partial scholarship to attend Riverside Prep. The more Marcus learned, the more questions arose. How did Emma and Dylan even cross paths? What motivated her to spend her free time tutoring someone who could afford the best private tutors money could buy? And most importantly, what could he do to help this remarkable young woman without revealing his true identity? As he sat there in the quiet of his luxurious home, Marcus realized that his undercover mission had revealed something he hadn't expected to find. It wasn't just about helping his son anymore. Emma Rodriguez had unknowingly shown him something that all his wealth couldn't buy: the power of genuine human connection and selfless kindness. Tomorrow he will return to Riverside Prep as Marcus Blake the janitor, and he would continue watching, learning, and planning his next move in a game where the stakes were higher than any business deal he'd ever negotiated. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Riverside Prep 30 minutes earlier than usual. He'd spent most of the night formulating a plan, and now he needed to gather more information. As Marcus Blake, he had access to areas of the school that Marcus Blackwood never could. He made his way to the administration office, pushing his cart past the secretary's desk where Mrs. Henderson was sorting through student files. She barely glanced up. After 3 months, he'd become part of the furniture. "Excuse me, ma'am," Marcus said, adopting the slightly deferential tone he'd perfected for his janitor persona. "I found this wallet in the hallway yesterday evening. Has anyone reported it missing?" Mrs. Henderson looked up, adjusting her glasses. The wallet was actually one Marcus had purchased specifically for this moment. Worn leather with a few dollar bills and a fake student ID inside. "Oh my, let me check our lost and found log." She pulled out a thick binder. "What name is on the ID?" "Emma Rodriguez, I think. Hard to read." "Ah, yes, Emma, sweet girl. She's here on the Morrison Scholarship. Only covers about 60% of tuition. Her mother used to teach at Jefferson Elementary before—" Mrs. Henderson trailed off, catching herself sharing too much personal information. "Before what?" Marcus asked innocently, wiping down a nearby window. "Health issues. A very sad situation. Emma worked so hard to keep her grades up. The scholarship requires maintaining a 3.8 GPA or higher." Mrs. Henderson made a note in her log. "I'll make sure she gets this back." Marcus nodded and continued his cleaning routine, but his mind was racing. Emma wasn't just helping Dylan out of kindness. She was doing it while managing her own academic pressure, a part-time job, and a sick mother. The weight of responsibility on her shoulders made her daily acts of patience with his son even more remarkable. Later that morning, he overheard a conversation that made his blood boil. "I still can't believe Dylan Blackwood needs a tutor," sneered Jessica Worthington, one of the school's social elite, as she stood near her locker with 2 friends. "Especially from scholarship girl Emma Rodriguez." I heard she works at that greasy diner on 5th Street, added another girl, Madison Cross. Can you imagine having to serve food to people? My dad says her mom is really sick or something. That's why Emma can't afford decent clothes, Jessica continued, checking her reflection in her phone camera. It's actually kind of pathetic. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus gripped his mop handle tighter, fighting every instinct to reveal himself and defend Emma. But he forced himself to remain invisible, filing away every cruel word for later consideration. That afternoon, he positioned himself strategically near study room C again. Emma arrived first, as usual, spreading her materials across the table with practiced efficiency. She pulled out a thermos, clearly homemade soup or coffee, and a small bag containing what looked like a sandwich wrapped in aluminum foil. Dylan arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a designer backpack and the latest smartphone. The contrast between them was stark, yet when they sat down together, those differences seemed to disappear. "How did your chemistry test go?" Emma asked, opening her notebook. "Better than expected, actually. I used that periodic table song you taught me," Dylan grinned sheepishly. "Mrs. Patterson probably thought I was crazy, humming during the test." Emma laughed, a genuine sound that filled the small room. "Whatever works. My little brother Miguel learned his multiplication tables the same way." "You have a brother?" "He's 8. Sometimes I help him with homework when I get home from work." Emma pulled out a crumpled math worksheet. "Actually, he's been struggling with word problems. Mind if we practice with some of his questions? It might help reinforce what we've been learning." Marcus watched his son's face transform. Instead of the usual reluctance Dylan showed when faced with additional work, he leaned forward with interest. "Sure, what kind of problems?" "Well, this one says Miguel has saved $12 from his allowance. He wants to buy a toy that costs $18. How much more money does he need?" Dylan worked through the problem carefully, showing his steps the way Emma had taught him. $6. He needs $6 more. Perfect! You're really getting this stuff. As they continued working, Marcus noticed Emma discreetly checking her phone. When it buzzed with what appeared to be a text message, her expression shifted slightly, worry creeping across her features. "Everything okay?" Dylan asked, surprisingly perceptive. Emma hesitated before answering. "My mom has a doctor's appointment this afternoon. She's been having some bad days lately." "What's wrong with her?" "Multiple sclerosis. It's a disease that affects the nervous system." Emma's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders. "Some days are better than others." Dylan was quiet for a moment. "That must be really scary." "It is, but we manage. She taught me that you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond to it." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Here was a 16-year-old girl, displaying more wisdom and maturity than most adults he knew. She was dealing with circumstances that would crush many people, yet she continued to show up every day with patience and kindness. "Is that why you helped me?" Dylan asked suddenly. "Because your mom was a teacher?" Emma considered the question carefully, partly, I guess, but also because I know what it's like to feel lost. "When Mom first got diagnosed, I felt like everything was falling apart. A teacher at my old school, Mr. Chen, spent extra time helping me catch up when I missed classes to go to Mom's appointments. He didn't have to do that." "So you're paying it forward." "Something like that." Their session was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Marcus looked up to see Jessica Worthington and her friends walking past the study room, their voices deliberately loud enough to be heard inside. "I can't believe some people actually eat lunch from home," Jessica said, eyeing Emma's simple meal through the glass. "Like, hello, the cafeteria exists for a reason." "Maybe some people can't afford $20 salads," Madison replied with fake concern. Emma's cheeks flushed red, but she kept her eyes focused on her textbook. Dylan, however, stood up abruptly. "Dylan, it's fine," Emma said quietly, reaching for his arm. But Dylan was already at the door. "Hey, Jessica!" The three girls turned, surprised by his attention. Jessica immediately brightened, assuming Dylan was finally ready to acknowledge her existence. "The cafeteria food is garbage," Dylan called out. "Emma's mom makes better soup than anything they serve here. Maybe you should try cooking sometime instead of just buying everything." Jessica's face went from hopeful to mortified in seconds. We were just being jerks to someone who's actually nice. Yeah, I noticed. The girls hurried away, whispering furiously among themselves. Dylan returned to the study room, his face still flushed with anger. You didn't have to do that, Emma said softly. Yes, I did. They were being awful. I'm used to it. Well, you shouldn't have to be. Marcus had to grip the handle of his mop to keep his hands from shaking. In that moment, he felt prouder of his son than he had in years. All the expensive private schools, tutors, and privileges he'd provided couldn't teach the kind of character Dylan had just displayed. That had come from somewhere else entirely, from watching Emma's quiet dignity and learning what real strength looked like. As the afternoon session ended, Marcus noticed Emma checking her phone again. This time, her face went pale. I have to go, she said quickly, gathering her things. Mom's appointment got moved up. Do you need a ride? Dylan offered. I could call my driver. Emma paused at the door. That's really sweet, but the bus is fine. I'll see you tomorrow. After she left, Dylan sat alone in the study room for several minutes, staring at the equations Emma had written on the whiteboard. Marcus wanted nothing more than to walk in there and tell his son how proud he was. But Marcus Blake, the janitor, had no reason to know what had just transpired. Instead, he continued his cleaning routine, all the while planning his next move. Emma Rodriguez was clearly struggling with more than just getting to school every day. And if his son cared about her, really cared, then Marcus was going to find a way to help, even if it meant maintaining his disguise a little longer. The game was getting more complicated, but the stakes had never been clearer. The following week brought an unexpected crisis that would change everything. Marcus arrived at school to find Dylan sitting alone in study room C, his head buried in his hands. It was already 20 minutes past their usual meeting time, and Emma was nowhere to be seen. This was the first time in over a month that she'd missed their session without warning. Dylan kept checking his phone, sending texts that apparently went unanswered. Finally, he packed up his books and left, his shoulders slumped with worry and disappointment. Marcus waited until the hallway was empty before pulling out his own phone. Within minutes, he'd used his resources to track down Emma's address and current situation. What he discovered made his chest tighten with concern. Maria Rodriguez had been hospitalized 3 days earlier after a severe MS flare-up. Emma had been splitting her time between school, work, and the hospital, trying to manage everything alone. According to the information Marcus gathered, their insurance covered only basic care, and Emma was facing the possibility of her mother needing long-term assisted living, something far beyond their financial means. That evening, Marcus made a decision that went against every principle of his undercover mission. He couldn't stand by and watch Emma struggle alone, not when he had the power to help. The next morning, he arrived at school with a carefully crafted plan. During his lunch break, he changed out of his janitor's uniform and into one of the expensive suits he kept in his car for emergencies. He walked into the school's main office as Marcus Blackwood, CEO, and concerned parent. I need to speak with Principal Morrison immediately, he told Mrs. Henderson, who nearly dropped her coffee cup when she recognized him. Mr. Blackwood! Of course, right away. Principal Morrison, a thin man with nervous energy, ushered Marcus into his office within minutes. What can I do for you, sir? Is everything all right with Dylan? Actually, I'm here about Emma Rodriguez. Morrison looked confused. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Is there some connection between Emma and your son? Marcus chose his words carefully. Emma has been tutoring Dylan, voluntarily, I might add. She's been instrumental in turning around his academic performance. Oh, well, that's wonderful to hear. Emma is one of our most dedicated students. I understand her mother is currently hospitalized. Morrison's expression grew somber. Yes, it's been very difficult for Emma. She's been trying to maintain her grades while dealing with her family situation. Frankly, I'm amazed she's managing as well as she is. Marcus leaned forward. I'd like to establish a fund to help families like the Rodriguez family. Medical emergencies, educational expenses, that sort of thing. I want to call it the Morrison Excellence Fund, in honor of your leadership here at the school. Morrison's eyes widened. That's incredibly generous, Mr. Blackwood. I'll start with a donation of $500,000. I want Emma's mother to receive the best medical care available, and I want Emma to never have to worry about her scholarship again. In fact, I'd like to extend her scholarship to cover full tuition plus a stipend for living expenses. This is extraordinary. But I have to ask, why specifically Emma? Marcus had prepared for this question because she embodies everything we should be teaching our children: compassion, dedication, resilience. She's helped my son not just academically, but as a human being. That's worth more than any donation I could make. Within hours, Marcus had his legal team drawing up the paperwork for the fund. By that afternoon, Maria Rodriguez was being transferred to the city's premier neurological facility, with all expenses covered. Emma received a call from the school informing her that her scholarship had been upgraded and that her mother's medical care was being handled by a new assistance program. But Marcus wasn't done yet. 2 days later, as Marcus Blake, the janitor, he overheard Emma on the phone in the hallway, her voice filled with tears of relief and gratitude. "No, Mom, they said it's completely covered. All of it. The treatment, the rehabilitation, everything." She paused, listening. "I don't know who's behind it." Principal Morrison said it was an anonymous donor who wanted to help families in our situation. That afternoon, Emma was back in study room C, her eyes bright with hope for the first time in weeks. Dylan practically tackled her with a hug when she walked in. "I was so worried about you. I tried texting, but—" "I know, I'm sorry. Things got really scary for a while there." Emma sat down, pulling out her books with renewed energy. "But we got some incredible news. Mom's getting treatment at St. Mary's Medical Center, and they say there are new therapies that might really help her condition." "That's amazing. How did you afford it?" "Someone set up a fund to help families like ours. We don't know who, but Mom cried for an hour when they told us. Good tears, though." Marcus, cleaning nearby, felt his own eyes growing moist. He'd made billion-dollar deals that hadn't given him half the satisfaction of seeing Emma's relief and joy. "So does this mean you can focus more on school?" Dylan asked. "Actually, I won't have to work as many hours at the diner anymore. The fund includes money for living expenses while I finish high school." Emma's smile was radiant. "I can't believe someone would do this for us without even knowing us." "Maybe they do know you," Dylan said thoughtfully. "Maybe they've seen what an incredible person you are." Over the following weeks, Marcus watched the transformation in both teenagers. Emma, relieved of the crushing financial pressure, began to flourish academically in ways that went beyond her already impressive grades. She joined the debate team and the science club, activities she'd never had time for before. Dylan, meanwhile, had become a different person entirely. His grades had improved dramatically, but more importantly, he'd developed empathy and awareness that money couldn't buy. He started volunteering at a local food bank and had even convinced some of his wealthier classmates to join him. The real test came when Jessica Worthington made another cruel comment about Emma in the cafeteria, this time within earshot of several students. "I heard someone's paying for a scholarship girl's mom to get fancy medical treatment," Jessica said loud enough for Emma to hear. "Probably feels sorry for them." Before Dylan could react, something unexpected happened. Other students began speaking up. "Emma's one of the smartest people in our class," said Robert Chen, the student body president. "She helped me with calculus last month," added Sarah Mitchell. "She's actually really nice." "Maybe you should try helping someone instead of just tearing them down," Dylan said firmly. But this time he wasn't alone. Jessica found herself facing a wall of disapproval from classmates who'd begun to see Emma for who she really was, not as a charity case, but as a leader and friend. The confrontation marked a turning point in the school's social dynamics. Emma's quiet dignity and Dylan's loyalty had created ripples that spread throughout their peer group. But Marcus knew his time as Marcus Blake was coming to an end. Dylan's grades were now solid A's and B's. More importantly, his son had found his moral compass and developed genuine friendships based on mutual respect rather than social status. The decision to reveal himself came when he overheard Emma and Dylan talking about their plans after graduation. "I want to study medicine," Emma was saying. "After everything Mom went through, I want to help other families who are dealing with chronic illness." "That's perfect for you," Dylan replied. "You'd be an amazing doctor. What schools are you looking at?" "Well, with the scholarship fund, I might actually be able to consider some really good programs. Stanford has an incredible pre-med track, and they have great financial aid." "Stanford's where I want to go too. We could room near each other." Marcus smiled to himself. His son had chosen Stanford not for its prestige or business connections, but because he wanted to continue his friendship with Emma. It was exactly the kind of decision Marcus had hoped Dylan would learn to make. That evening, Marcus sat in his penthouse office, staring out at the city lights. Tomorrow he will end the charade. Not because he had to, but because both Emma and Dylan deserved to know the truth about the man who'd been watching over them. He'd learned more in the past few months than in years of board meetings and business negotiations. Real wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or stock portfolios. It was measured in the connections you made, the lives you touched, and the character you developed along the way. The next afternoon, Marcus arrived at school for the last time as Marcus Blake. He waited until Emma and Dylan finished their study session, then knocked on the door of study room C. "Excuse me," he said, his heart pounding. "Could I speak with both of you for a moment?" Dylan looked up confused. "Dad, what are you doing here? And why are you dressed like—" The recognition hit Dylan like a physical blow. His father, wearing janitor's coveralls, standing in the doorway of the room where he'd been meeting with Emma for months. "You're Marcus Blake," Dylan whispered, his face cycling through shock, embarrassment, and anger. Emma looked back and forth between them, trying to understand what was happening. "Dylan, I can explain," Marcus began, but his son was already standing. "You've been spying on me this whole time, pretending to be a janitor so you could watch me." "It wasn't like that. I was worried about your grades, about what was going wrong, and I couldn't figure out how to help you." Emma finally found her voice. "Mr. Blackwood? You're Dylan's father?" "Yes, and I owe you both an explanation." Marcus spent the next hour telling them everything, his concerns about Dylan's failing grades, his decision to go undercover, and his growing admiration for Emma's character and kindness. He explained how he'd watched Dylan transform from a frustrated, angry teenager into someone capable of genuine compassion and moral courage. "Every day I cleaned these halls watching students walk past each other without really seeing one another," Marcus continued. "Wealthy kids who had everything but understood nothing about real struggle. And then I saw you, Emma, treating my son not as a project or a social connection, but as a human being worth investing in." Dylan's anger was slowly giving way to understanding. "But why didn't you just hire me as a tutor, or talk to me directly?" "Because I tried that route first. Do you remember Dr. Hartwell, the academic consultant who came to the house? The guy who made me feel like an idiot for 2 hours? Exactly. And Mrs. Chen, the private tutor who charged $300 an hour? She just wanted to get through the session as fast as possible," Dylan admitted. "I realized that throwing money at the problem wasn't working. You needed something I couldn't buy. You needed someone who genuinely cared about your success, not someone who was paid to pretend they did." Emma had been processing this revelation quietly. "Mr. Blackwood, when you were cleaning outside our study sessions, were you listening to our conversations?" Marcus looked ashamed. "Initially, yes. I'm not proud of that. But Emma, what I heard changed everything I thought I knew about education, about character, about what it means to help another person." "What do you mean?" "You never made Dylan feel stupid, even when he struggled with concepts that seemed basic. You found ways to connect math problems to real life, to make learning feel relevant rather than abstract. But more than that, you shared pieces of your own life, your mother's illness, your little brother's homework struggles, that made Dylan realize he wasn't alone in facing challenges." Dylan sat back down, his initial anger replaced by curiosity. "So you saw all of that?" "I saw you defend Emma against Jessica and her friends. I saw you offer her rides when you knew she took the bus across town. I watched you become the kind of person I'd always hoped you could be but never knew how to teach you to become." Emma shifted uncomfortably. "This is still really strange. You've been watching us this whole time, and I never suspected anything. I know it's unsettling. But Emma, I also saw how you handled the pressure of maintaining your scholarship while working part-time and caring for your mother. I watched you choose kindness over self-preservation, even when other students made cruel comments about your circumstances." "The scholarship fund," Emma said slowly. "That was you." "Yes. You've been helping us this whole time, and I never knew." Marcus nodded. "I couldn't stand by and watch you struggle when I had the resources to help. But I also couldn't reveal myself without risking the authentic relationship you'd built with Dylan." Dylan was processing this information, his emotions complex and conflicted. I can't believe you didn't trust me enough to just talk to me. We could have figured this out together. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. But Dylan, watching you these past few months, seeing the man you've become, I've never been prouder of you. You mean that? I mean it completely. You stood up for Emma when no one else would. You chose friendship over social status. You developed empathy and character that I could never have taught you in a lecture or bought you with money. You learned lessons that most adults never master. Emma, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke. Mr. Blackwood, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for my family. The medical treatment for my mom, the extended scholarship, the living expenses fund, it's changed our entire life. You don't need to thank me, Emma. You gave my son something far more valuable than anything I could give you. You showed him what real character looks like. You demonstrated that intelligence isn't just about test scores, that strength isn't about having the most money, and that leadership means lifting others up rather than pushing them down. On curl, Dylan looked at Emma, then at his father, his anger finally dissolving into something approaching understanding. So what happens now? Do you go back to being a CEO and we pretend none of this ever happened? Marcus smiled, pulling off his janitor's cap for the final time. Now we move forward as a family. And Emma, I hope you'll consider yourself part of that family. You've certainly earned it. But the conversation was far from over. Emma had questions that demanded answers. Mr. Blackwood, there's something I need to understand. When you established the scholarship fund, how did you know exactly what our family needed? The amount covered not just my mom's treatment, but also physical therapy, medications, and even modifications to our apartment for her mobility issues. Marcus looked uncomfortable. I may have done some research into your family situation. Research? I had my legal team look into your mother's medical records, your family's financial situation, your employment at the diner. He held up his hands as Emma's expression darkened. I know how that sounds, but I needed to understand the full scope of what you were dealing with. Dylan frowned. Dad, that's pretty invasive. You're both right to be upset about that. I crossed a line, and I apologize. But Emma, when I learned that your mother had been denied coverage for several experimental treatments that could significantly improve her condition, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Emma's anger softened slightly. Those treatments, they're working. Mom walked to the mailbox yesterday without her cane. She hasn't been able to do that in over a year. I'm glad to hear that. But I want you both to understand something important. The help I provided wasn't charity. It was an investment in two extraordinary young people who were already changing each other's lives. Over the following weeks, the three of them navigated this new dynamic carefully. Dylan struggled with feelings of betrayal and embarrassment, while Emma grappled with the knowledge that her family's turnaround had come from someone who'd been secretly observing her most vulnerable moments. The first major test came when Dylan's friends from his old social circle invited him to an exclusive party at the Worthington estate. Pre-Emma, Dylan would have attended without question. Now he faced a different dilemma. I don't want to go, he told Emma as they studied together one afternoon. But if I don't show up, they'll think I'm too good for them now. Are you too good for them? Dylan considered this seriously. I don't think I'm better than them. But I don't think I fit in with them anymore either. They spend entire conversations talking about expensive things they've bought or exotic vacations they've taken. I used to do that too. What would you rather talk about? Honestly, I've been reading about sustainable farming techniques. I think I want to minor in environmental science at Stanford. Emma grinned. That's amazing. What sparked that interest? Remember when you told me about your mom's garden? How did she grow vegetables even though you lived in an apartment, using containers on the fire escape? She called it making something beautiful out of small spaces. I keep thinking about that phrase. Most of my friends are obsessed with taking up as much space as possible. Bigger houses, bigger cars, more land. But your family created something meaningful in a tiny apartment. That seems more impressive to me. This conversation, overheard by Marcus as he passed by their new study location in the school library, confirmed what he'd hoped. Dylan's transformation was genuine and lasting. The party invitation became a teaching moment when Dylan decided to attend, but with conditions. He asked Emma to come with him as his date, knowing it would challenge the social dynamics of his former peer group. Are you sure about this? Emma asked. I don't exactly fit in with the country club crowd. That's exactly why I want you there. They need to see what real class looks like. The party proved to be a turning point for both of them. Emma, dressed in a simple but elegant dress that Dylan had helped her pick out, carried herself with quiet confidence. When Jessica Worthington made a snide comment about, quote, charity cases crashing private parties, Emma responded with grace and intelligence that left Jessica looking foolish. I'm grateful for the scholarship assistance I've received, Emma said calmly. It's allowed me to focus on my studies and spend more time with friends like Dylan who value character over bank accounts. Dylan watched with pride as Emma engaged other party guests in conversations about everything from current events to literature to scientific breakthroughs. By the end of the evening, several students had asked her to help them with their own studies. The real revelation came when Marcus, no longer disguised as a janitor, was invited to speak at the school's career day. His presentation wasn't about business success or wealth accumulation. Instead, he spoke about the importance of understanding all levels of an organization and the dignity of every type of work. I learned more about leadership during 3 months as a school janitor than I did in 3 years of executive training, he told the assembled students. When you're invisible to the people around you, you see how they really behave when they think no one important is watching. After his presentation, several students approached him with questions that went far beyond typical career advice. They wanted to know about ethical business practices, about using wealth responsibly, about the difference between success and significance. Emma and Dylan watched from the back of the auditorium as Marcus fielded these questions with honesty and humility. He talked about his own mistakes, his journey toward understanding what really mattered, and the lessons he'd learned from watching 2 teenagers demonstrate more wisdom than many adults possess. He's different now, Emma observed quietly. Yeah, he is. We all are. Dylan looked at Emma, then at his father, addressing the students with genuine passion rather than corporate platitudes. I'm still processing all of this. The deception, the help he provided, the way everything worked out. How do you feel about it? Grateful, I think. And maybe a little proud that he thought we were worth all that effort and risk. Emma smiled. I'm proud of you too. You could have chosen to be embarrassed by having a father who worked as a janitor. Instead, you're proud of him for caring enough to do whatever it took to understand your world. Dylan looked at Emma, then at his father, and realized that the man speaking to those students wasn't just the successful CEO Marcus Blackwood. He was also Marcus Blake, the janitor who'd learned about dignity, compassion, and the true value of honest work. So what happens now? Dylan asked Emma, echoing the question he'd posed weeks earlier. Now we keep being the people we've become. Your dad gave us a gift, but we're the ones who have to decide what to do with it. And what do you want to do with it? Emma's eyes sparkled with determination. Change the world, one tutoring session at a time. 6 months later, Dylan and Emma graduated together as co-valedictorians. Emma's acceptance speech brought the entire auditorium to tears as she spoke about the power of unexpected kindness and the importance of lifting each other up. Marcus sat in the audience, no longer disguised, watching his son and the remarkable young woman who'd changed both their lives. The janitor's uniform was long gone, but the lessons he'd learned while wearing it would stay with him forever. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and celebrations, Emma approached Marcus with her mother, who was walking steadily with the help of a cane. Her condition significantly improved thanks to the advanced treatments she'd received. Mr. Blackwood, Maria Rodriguez said, extending her hand, I understand we have you to thank for giving us our lives back. Actually, Mrs. Rodriguez, it was your daughter who gave me my life back. She taught my son and me what really matters. Emma hugged Dylan, then surprised Marcus by hugging him too. Thank you for seeing something in me that I didn't even see in myself. The same could be said of you, Marcus replied. You saw the potential in Dylan when everyone else had given up on him. As the sun set over Riverside Prep, Marcus realized that his greatest business success hadn't happened in a boardroom or at a shareholder meeting. It had happened in a janitor's uniform, watching 2 teenagers discover the best in themselves and each other. Sometimes the most valuable investments can't be measured in dollars and cents. Sometimes they're measured in the moments when a wealthy man learns humility, a struggling boy finds his purpose, and a kind girl discovers that her compassion can change the world. The disguise was over, but the real work, the work of being a better father, a better man, and a better human being was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.